One neat thing about the Harlem Renaissance is that people were inspired to accomplish many things. The author Langston Hughes was more than just a poet. He was a novelist, a playwright, a social activist, and many other things. But what maybe he's most well known for is being an innovator in what we call jazz poetry. Now, if you notice when we read A Dream Deferred as a class, the poem had a really smooth rhythm and it sounded real bluesy and contemplative. Now, these are factors that are pretty indicative of jazz poetry. The jazz movement in music during the Harlem Renaissance was very similar to that in literature. And people were experimenting with expressing themselves in ways that were really charged with emotion. And not just any emotion, but the powerful ones like passion or desperation. Now, Langston Hughes had what we call comorbid success, which means that he was successful in different areas kind of at the same time. And this comorbidity, or comorbid success, is a good example of how there are many different factors that are affecting and interacting with themes of a time during any given time in history. Circumstances don't happen independently. There are many other things to look to as we try to figure out how a culture has, in this case the Harlem Renaissance, has affected our culture today. So as we begin to think about our thesis statements for our papers, remember, a thesis statement is a general sentence with a subject and an opinion. Keep in mind as you start writing your outline that authors are seeking to share information about their culture, this really complicated history with you, the reader. And as the reader, we have to think a little bit harder about what the author is trying to tell us. But it's okay. We have to think a little harder, but we'll just take it one step at a time, and we'll ask ourselves different questions, kind of like the cluster questions I gave you in our seminar. Look back at those and kind of review leading questions like, why is a character doing this, or what do they look like, and map your words. Put them in categories and then decide what those categories mean, what they're trying to tell you. What do they have in common? How are they different? And then compile a theme, and we'll be able to figure out how this culture that we're looking at, Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s, has affected us today.